All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So 28 of you on the call, which is fine. We're going to record this, so all those of you who are not tuning in live, you will have a chance to listen to this talk, which is an introductory talk in ethics. And we're being joined by Wojtek. I will not be attempting to pronounce your surname because I know I will make a mistake. But I'm really grateful you are joining us. So everyone, Wojtek is a specialist in AI. He's studying, he's reading AI at PhD level at Cambridge University, but he is also working in one of these big fintech investment companies here in London called Fidelity International. You may have heard of this. And Wojtek is here to really kick off our ethics sessions. We will be running daily sessions either in tech or ethics this week, which will just be one talk per day, just to take it very easy. And then next week, we're going to up to 3 talks per day. And again, they will vary in different topics. But this one is the first one. I know I already sent some stuff in the Ethics Matters channel, and I shared with you one TED Talk on racial biases and another TED Talk on Cambridge Analytica. So as you will hear from Wojtek, there have been a number of disastrous case studies that have happened in recent past where technology has not been used for the benefit of the society, or has been abused or used in a way we didn't quite expect it to happen. But Wojtek, it's all yours now. So take it away and tell us all about the ethics, why it matters, and what happens when people ignore it, basically.
Okay, so first of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Just to be sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let's do some housekeeping first. So my name is Wojtek, and the last name is Buczynski. This is how we pronounce it. I'm Polish, and you can see my name on the bottom of the first slide. And those 3-letter acronyms is just something old people do when they run out of exciting things to do. So it's a bit odd to realize how much younger most of you are, and you know, you may probably find yourselves a little overwhelmed with the amount of things that are being thrown at you, but you know, I am twice as overwhelmed and mortified because I don't want to fail you, and I'm also very, very excited. So it's a mixture of all these feelings, and you know, I just don't want to let you down, and I want to make Elena proud, I guess. So as Elena said, I'm Polish. I'm based in London. I have lived here for a couple of years now, and I sort of live a double life. So in my day life, I work in financial services, investment management for Fidelity International, where I cover governance of emerging technologies, chief among them being AI and the cloud. And in my double life, and when you're grown-ups, you will understand what this really means. I am a student in Cambridge, so indeed I'm reading for a PhD in ethics of applications in AI in financial services. And just to be perfectly clear, I'm speaking on my personal behalf only today. So it's you know, my views may not necessarily represent the views of Fidelity. And I just want to say that when Elena told me that, you know, you are ages 11 to 18, and you know, when I try to think about your technological prowess, I'm like speechless and a little mortified. So I'm just so impressed with each and every one of you, and I just hope that I'll be able to be useful to you in any way. And with that behind us, let's do some terminology, because I don't want to assume that all the terms go without saying, particularly that you know, some of you have not done much business and some of you are not using English as your first language. So let's just cover the basics first. So the main words that we'll be using that relate to AI ethics are ethics, discrimination, and bias. And the definitions that you have here and that you'll be able to see when you play this back come from Simple English Wikipedia, which I think is a great source to explain complicated things relatively simply. So ethics is one of those terms that is kind of difficult to explain, but it's once you understand it, you sort of do. So it's about understanding good from evil. And it's not about religion or faith. It's the kind of good and evil that is universal. Like, you know, you shouldn't hurt a fellow person, or you shouldn't steal, that sort of thing. The universal value system. And it's mostly about, you know, how can you tell good, how can you tell bad? And also trying to be aware of how our actions might impact other people and not just ourselves. So another word that you hear a lot in AI in general, and you'll hear in this presentation, is bias. So bias, it means that for whatever reason you have an existing preference towards something, and you may not give a fair chance to something else. So like, I have a confession, I am biased in favor of cheesecake, and I will not give, I don't know, an apple pie a fair chance because I just love cheesecake. So I'm like, you know, I'm totally biased in favor of cheesecake, so therefore I'm biased against apple pie or I don't know, red velvet cake. So bias, you can be aware of it, but very often you're not. So you might think that you're fair and objective, but actually you may still be biased. Bias might be unaware. And the last word, which is really unpleasant, and unfortunately many of you probably know it already despite your very young ages, is discrimination. And we hear it so much these days, and you would hope that, you know, it's gone and dead, but it's not. It's alive and well. So discrimination means that somebody is receiving unfair treatment, and that unfair treatment can be due to a number of reasons. So it may be to do with the color of your skin, or your age, or your gender, or your political beliefs, or your weight, or your sexual orientation, or your religion, or a trillion other things. Discrimination just means that you do not get a fair chance at something you're attempting. So, you know, it just means that you can be discriminated against and not get a job, even though you're better qualified than the other candidate. But the other candidate, let's say a white male, and you are a woman of color, and the recruiter is discriminating against you. And in that case, you don't get a fair chance, and this is discrimination. All of these words are ugly, and I really feel badly as a grown-up that I have to teach you them, but unfortunately, I do. And another word that unfortunately we hear very, very much lately is an R word, which is racist or racism. And this is a little thought experiment. So when you think the word racist, you can really picture a lot of images in your head. If you Google racist, Google image, you will get mostly images of one person who shall remain nameless, who may or may not be a current president of the United States, but it's mostly images of that person. However, I think that even those of you who are very intelligent and very creative would unlikely associate the word racist with what I'm about to show you now. So, ladies and gentlemen, behold, this is the racist soap dispenser. I'm not kidding, this is not a joke. This is an actual recording that went viral in certain circles. This is a soap dispenser that only responds to light skin tone and therefore is racist. And
what have I witnessed? That's racist. That's so racist.
They are.
So look what happens when the black person has a white towel. The dispenser dispenses the soap. Whereas if you put a dark skinned hand on its own, it's not happening. And the reason I'm showing you this, it's not just because of its entertainment value. It's just to make you aware how weirdly biases and discriminations might happen and manifest themselves. And if you think that this is a one-off weird freak example, then let me show you this, and this, and this, and this, and this too. All of these are very recent examples of what we can broadly define as algorithmic discrimination that made it to the news. Some of them made it mainstream, some of them made it niche. So in top right, you have a very recent case from deep learning AI, whereby an AI algorithm that is trying to enhance the resolution of pixelated photos does a very good job of sharpening them all into white. And the pixelated image on the left, most of you probably recognize as former US President Barack Obama. Many of you have probably heard about the discriminatory AI that Amazon used briefly in recruitment that did very bad things to Amazon's reputation. And only a couple of days ago, the esteemed great Massachusetts Institute of Technology has retired an enormous database of images, some 80 million. It's called Tiny Image, I believe, just because it was discovered that some of them had just openly racist, terrible descriptions. So, if you use such info for such data for AI training, then you can only imagine how biased and how discriminatory the model will be. And if you think that this stuff is bad, let me show you my anti-favorite example, which is this. Unfortunately, this is not a test and this is not a joke. It's an actual company that still exists today. I believe it's based in Israel, that claims that it can reveal your personality just on the basis of the image. Just to be clear, it's not your facial expressions, it's not how you speak or what you say, it's literally just your photo. And this is actually a more recent rendering of their website, because I'm pretty sure that some months ago they advertised that they can discover a terrorist face. So yeah, this is my personal worst. So let's talk a little bit about AI. So AI is all the rage, and AI is hip and happening, but is it really that different to other milestones in computer science? So all of you must be aware of the processing power of CPUs or GPUs getting faster and faster each year, allowing you to do cool things that you weren't able to do a year before. And a few of you, the older ones, may remember life before cloud computing, when all your storage and processing power was actually in the PC or laptop on your desk. And none of you, unfortunately, remember what life was before internet. But trust me, there was life before internet, and we managed to live it, and I'm old enough to remember it. So we've experienced a number of milestones in computing that revolutionized our lives in the past 20 years or so, but AI is different to all of them. And the reason is because AI can learn on its own. And, other technologies really do not have that issue. Whether you're using BASIC or JavaScript or Python, it will only ever do what you've clearly programmed it to do. The cloud has 1 million times more storage than my hard disk drive and more computing power than my laptop. But it doesn't really make it any smarter. It's just more of the same thing. Or fiber optic broadband is hundreds of times faster than dial-up, which you're probably too young to remember, but it doesn't make it any smarter. It's the same thing, only more, only better, only faster. And if you're running Intel i7 or Intel i5 or whatever, it's hundreds or thousands times faster than the Pentium processor. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. That's something that existed when I was a kid. But without a program to run on it, it's just a piece of silicon. There's no intelligence to it. And back to AI. AI is different because it learns on its own. At the same time, unlike us people, AI doesn't have any idea of good and bad. It doesn't really understand anything the way we do. It doesn't understand or know what discrimination is, what fairness is, what racism is. It doesn't even understand right from wrong. It's just technology that tries to find the best solution to categorize or to optimize, but that's pretty much it. So things that we take for granted with humans, at least normal humans, that we know what right is and wrong and what things you shouldn't do to other people or animals, etc. AI has none of that. And at the same time, it will learn based on the data you feed it, which means that if you feed it a massive database of images that have horrible, discriminatory, racist captions, you know, it might end up labeling a photo of a black person with the N-word because that's what it was taught. It has no filter of its own. And this is why AI ethics is so, so very important. But before we move to AI ethics on its own, let's just take a little step back and talk about effect versus intent. So if you think back a couple of slides to our unfortunate examples, so, you know, the discriminatory recruiter AI at Amazon, or the allegedly discriminatory credit card issued jointly by Apple and Goldman Sachs, or, you know, all those other examples, I'm pretty sure that most or all of them, they were completely unintentional. You know, I doubt that Goldman Sachs wanted to discriminate against women because it stood nothing to gain from it, and actually it suffered reputationally from it. And I really doubt that the engineers who built that tragic soap dispenser were racists who just thought, oh, you know, we'll discriminate soap dispensing on the basis of skin color. They just haven't fully thought things through or haven't tested them properly, and the results were bad. But the bottom line is, especially in business and in finance, is that nobody cares. It's really all about effect, not intent. And that's the phrase I really want you to learn by heart. Effect, not intent. The intent does not count. It's the effect that does. So you can have the best intentions, but if you end up creating something that is unfair or discriminatory or racist, or I don't know, doesn't respect people's privacy or doesn't show concern for their well-being, you will be judged on the effect. Your good intentions count for nothing or next to nothing. So the intent counts only if it was bad intent, because if it can be proven that you started doing something with bad intent from the get-go, that means that you will be punished even more severely. If the effect was bad and the intent was good, then the intent doesn't really count. You will always be judged on the effect. And particularly when we're dealing with anything in the business space, you know, your intentions don't count for much, if anything. It is the effect. And even more so, it will be things that apply to human safety, such as, you know, healthcare or self-driving vehicles or a million other potential applications. If you end up causing someone harm, you will pay the price for it in reputation, in costs, in a number of different ways. So remember, if you ever want to argue that you had good intentions, the judge or your boss or your clients will really tell you very clearly that they don't care. So this is something that I want you to bear in mind at every stage of your work from day one. And this kind of takes us to the core of what I wanted to say, which is AI ethics by design. So I have a little confession to make, and I hope that Elena doesn't fire me as an AI mentor, because I'm not really an AI ethicist. Because to me, an ethicist is somebody who studied ethics or philosophy or history or maybe theology, you know, like a very academic person. I studied finance and I loved it. I'm a business guy. And the reason I'm telling you that is because there are at least two ways you can look at AI ethics, and you don't get this explanation in many of the online resources. So you can look at AI ethics from theoretical perspective, values. And you hear about them all the time. You hear about them so much everywhere. It's values like justice, human-centric AI, cause no harm, trustworthy AI, fair AI, well-being, privacy, etc., etc. And they are absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with them. You may have even heard a couple of months ago that IBM and Microsoft started discussing and consulting AI ethics with the Vatican, which is absolutely great and admirable, and there's nothing wrong from that. But my question is, how do we move from these values, which may seem very, very sort of lofty, And how do we take it down to engineering practice, which is outcomes? So before you start working on your project, or if you've started already, I want you to really ask yourselves, what kind of ethical questions apply to your specific engineering project? Because some of these values are sometimes very difficult to translate into coding or very difficult to relate to a particular project. And you need to bear in mind that there will be different ethical considerations for different individual projects. So, for example, something like discrimination will be very relevant to think about for a system that screens candidates for employment, but it will not be really relevant for an AI-powered autopilot on a commercial flight. You know, it's not like discrimination simply doesn't apply. Or other example, privacy will be absolutely critical for any healthcare applications, including mental health. But will it apply to a fancy AI-powered cybersecurity system? I mean, I don't think so. It's totally different applications and totally different considerations. Or, I don't know, fairness will be absolutely fundamental for an AI that determines whether to give me a credit card and what limit to give me. But it really will make no sense for a machine vision system that does quality control on an assembly line in a factory. So what I'm trying to say, and I hope I'm succeeding, is that you need to think about values, but you need to translate them into practical questions. How do ethics apply to your particular project? How, which ethical questions apply and which are kind of beside the point? And all those very noble values that are so much in the media these days, like justice, fairness, human-centric AI, trustworthy AI, focus on well-being, focus on privacy, they're all absolutely fine. They're admirable. You should always strive to achieve them. But you might encounter a challenge that I see in business quite a lot, is that they may seem so high and your project might seem, just like a basic app. And you think, well, none of this makes any sense. None of this is relevant to what I do. I'm just building a natural language processing app that tries to get automated headline readers for, to see where the sentiment is in the financial market. So in some way, many of these may not apply, but some of them always will. And this is something you need to figure out by yourselves. And the sooner you figure them out, the better. Because you need to figure out which ethical questions and which values apply to your project, and then make sure that you really think about them. So in my company, we have this fancy expression, which is operationalizing ethics. So this is sort of like mixing water and oil. You take values, which is ethics, and you take everyday business practice, on so many levels, and just figure out how do you translate values and principles into a checklist. Like, this is something that I've been working on for like a year now. How do you build an AI ethics checklist that I can show to my colleagues who did computer science, but not necessarily business, so that they can think about the systems they're developing from a perspective that I want them to think about, rather than just as a, as a task in optimizing, sorting, classifying, categorizing, etc., etc. And this is something that I encourage you to do very strongly, because if you try starting from an AI checklist perspective, then there is a chance that you will come up with some good questions. And once you come up with the good questions, you will think about good answers. And this way you can save yourself from a catastrophe. So from a purely business perspective, and even though you're working on sort of AI for good programs, I think it's good to have a bit of a business mindset as well. I have some very basic starting questions for you to think about. So one question is, what could possibly go wrong? Because if you think nothing will ever go wrong, you are mistaken. Another question, who could get hurt? Who could endure harm? I'm sure that you all want to do projects that benefit the users and yourselves, but could somebody get hurt unintentionally? Could somebody be put in danger? Could somebody's mental health be put at risk? Alternatively, you can also ask yourselves, who could get angry? Like, think about a boss, and some of you may not have had a boss in your life just yet, and lucky you, but I think most of you will. So try to picture that boss, or I don't know, your teacher or whoever, using that app, and think, who could get angry as a result of some unintentional consequences of using your app or system or cloud solution, whatever. Because in business terms, angry, we don't really say angry very much. In business terms, we ask a much more scary question: who could sue us? Because in business, you don't really get angry. In business, you get even and you get sued. And if you're proven guilty, then you might end up paying a compensation to someone you have wronged. Then obviously nobody wants that. But try to think about it from that perspective. Like, try to picture yourself as very, very young, and I have no doubt very successful business people of the future. And try to, think about all the cool business movies you have seen and think, who could sue you if you did something wrong with your project? Because if you try to anticipate that, then chances are you will come up with a solution how not to get sued. And this is kind of it. This is Wojtek's 30 minutes on AI ethics. So I put some resources for you, but there's something called Ethics Canvas, which is kind of like a checklist. It's very detailed, and I think at times maybe a little bit too detailed, especially for the purposes of a 2-week project. But I think it's a good starting point. And something else that we refer to a lot in academic and business circles is publications by regulators and government bodies, and the one by European Commission is from April last year, and it's very prominent, and it focuses specifically on ethics. And please do look at them. Elena can share the links with you, but mind the headline. They will not do the job for you. It's not like you can outsource the task of thinking about ethics to a checklist or to a document. It's really on you. You have to think about it, and you have to think very hard what questions apply to your specific project. And the ethics canvas or the ethics guidelines can be helpful to give you some pointers. But remember that this responsibility is on you, just like responsibility for your project. And with that, I have come to an end of my completely unrehearsed presentation. I hope it didn't go particularly badly. And we are done. And I don't know, Elena, do you want to curate a Q&A now?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much, first of all, Wojtek. That was a fantastic presentation. Yes, it was really, really good introduction to some of the, the issues we're grappling with. So I have been watching the comments sort of from the teenagers. I can read some of them to you. So obviously there was this strong reaction when you started showing the dispenser. That is so racist, that is so not nice, oh my God. So the kind of typical reactions, which is great. I'm really glad that you are finding this disappointing. And comments from Israel: why do humans understand morality and ethicality, but AI does not? Is, for instance, one of the questions. How would you respond to that?
So I saw that question as well.
Yeah.
So it's probably a topic for like a 3-year philosophy course, but it's really important that we don't project humanity onto AI, at least not yet. So as humans, we have something called consciousness and self-consciousness and awareness. So I don't just exist as Wojtek. I also realize that I exist. I can reflect on my actions. I can try to look at my actions from other perspectives. And AI is really just technology. It might be super fancy and might get so much smarter in years to come, but it doesn't as yet have consciousness, and it doesn't have awareness. And the value systems that we as humans acquired over pretty much millions of years of evolution, since we started evolving from primates, this is something that is so obvious to us, unless we're psychopaths, which I hope none of us here is, that they go without saying. But try to think about AI just like technology. It can learn, but it doesn't have values. It doesn't have the ethics that we take sort of for granted, or morality that we acquire in our life, and that is on some level also quite universal. So just think about it as very, very powerful function optimizer or classifier or categorizer, and don't attribute to it the features of your humanity. And one day we might get, wonderful emergent AI that will become self-conscious, and this conversation will then become irrelevant. But at present, that's not the case.
Let's make sure that doesn't happen very soon. So the question is, Charlize is asking. Charlize, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that question yourself?
Hi, I just wanted to ask, how can you create a project that's completely ethical when ethicality is completely subjective to your audience and whoever sees it? So if you were to create a project that would influence on a global scale, how could you manufacture this to everyone else?
The project you will create here won't be that relevant to China, because their ethics is quite different to to the ethics as we know it here, for instance. So Wojtek, think about some examples, and maybe you could give us some thoughts on that.
So, there's ethics and morals, and if I remember correctly, but I always get this wrong, is ethics is something that we're more or less born with, whereas morals is something we acquire through life experience. And I would argue that some very basic ethics is hopefully relatively universal across the world. And, things like harming other people is bad, stealing is bad, murder is bad, using violence is bad. I think that however basic that sounds, that's pretty universal. And I don't know if you can ever have a project that's 100% ethical, but I can tell you that you should try. And we have so many, just turn on the news and you'll see so many examples of people doing really insane, really terrible things. And a good starting point is simply to do the opposite. So, when you hear so much, and this is very unfortunate for an adult to teach to young people, because I really wish that was a matter of the past, about racial discrimination, I think we all universally agree, I hope so, that it's a terrible thing. So you simply know that you should be mindful of that in your project, if that's a relevant concern. The principle of no harm, I think that's universal across countries, systems, religions, etc. So the least you should try to do is to do good with your project, particularly in these workshops where you try to do things that benefit the society one way or another. So do no harm, that's the main principle in medicine. You should apply the same. Or ask yourself, how can your project make something better in the world? And I know that sounds a bit like, fluffy, but yeah, maybe it can make somebody's mental health better, or maybe it can help somebody's physical health get better, or I don't know, improve somebody's education. Like, just between you and I wasn't always a good student. For a number of years in my 20s, I really had the student block, and I felt so overwhelmed. And if I had, I don't know, a good way of learning then, maybe I wouldn't be a PhD student now. Maybe I would already be Dr. Wojtek. So, there's so many ways in which a solution, an app, a system can help other person benefit, or I don't know, help them do good, like pollute less or save money for their pension. There's there's a million things you could do for your fellow humans and for the world at large. And I think this is pretty universal, regardless of where you live.
So we have another question from Jam. Is consciousnness an emergent behavior of intelligence? Wojtek.
Okay, so I saw this question. That's aiming really high. So some of you probably know that, but there is no very clear and universal definition even of intelligence. We use this word multiple times every single day, and everybody more or less knows what it is, but it's a little bit like art. Everybody kind of knows what it is, but it's very difficult to define. And consciousness and self-awareness are also a little difficult to define, certainly in any terms that are engineering, because you just tell, you know, consciousness is the property of being conscious. It's like, you know, it's not really a great explanation. And yes, one of the theories is that consciousness is, once you reach a certain level of intelligence, it just emerges. But I don't think that we will really know whether this theory is right or wrong until we see or we don't see consciousness emerging in AI once it reaches a certain level of complexity. And I think we will only be able to prove it if we see it. And if we don't see it, then the argument will be, well, the AI is just not smart enough yet.
Jam is asking then another follow-up question. Can the relation between a developer and an AI be related to the relation between a parent and a child? As a parent has responsibility for a child, to what degree does the creator have responsibility for an AI?
So that is a good question. I think I can understand that most of you will look at your projects as your babies, which is only understandable, and you will love them. At least that's understandable. But if I may suggest just a slight tweak of this perspective, you can think about AIs as your babies, your pets, whatever you want, but try to focus on the relationship between your AI project and somebody who uses it. Try to think about all the dynamics, all the connections there. Think about that person, and you can picture somebody you know, your parents, your colleagues, your grandma, your teachers, especially somebody you are close to, and try to picture them using your app or your system, and try to anticipate whether you know, the way it acts, it will help your loved ones in something, or whether it will somehow make them happier. Because if you focus purely on the relationship between yourself and your AI, then there is a chance that you'll essentially create this AI for yourself.
All right. So
the objective here, you're creating a product, a solution.
Wojtek, we have to end because I know you. You know, we've got another 2 sessions.
Yes, sorry, overrun.
Yeah. We have overrun a little bit, but everyone was a little bit late. So everyone, please, tomorrow and every day, we're going to start 5 o'clock sharp. I will not be, you know, extending the wait time. So please do try and be here on time so that we run all our sessions on time. So Wojtek, you're hired as our ethics mentor. So yes, so we obviously are going to bombard you with a lot of questions in Discord. Whenever you have the time to join us, please do join us. And I know you are going to have, you're going to do another talk on, remind me what the name of that talk is, and this will be next Friday or Saturday.
Yeah, so the other talk is just about the practical application of AI. So it's, so, you know, this can be, it's just an example. You will not miss anything by seeing it last. It's about the application of artificial intelligence in anti-money laundering, which is, you know, the act of criminals putting their money into a financial system. And thank you for hiring me, Elena. It's actually a huge honor, and that was quite nerve-wracking. I just want to say tomorrow I will probably not be online much because I'm picking my mom up, but I'll try to say hi to everyone properly on Thursday. So why don't you just try to think about any AI questions between now and Thursday, and we'll kick off from there. And I'll spend some full-time afternoons in the next week I think I took Monday, Tuesday, I don't remember, but I've got a number of afternoons to dedicate to mentorship, and I'll try to be a roving mentor as well. So thank you very much, everyone. I am absolutely honored to be useful to you.
Thank you.
I hope that I will be, and I'll leave you to your next talk. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wojtek. Jam and Azman, I know you guys are in the Discord, in the Zoom call already, on the Zoom call. So if you are ready, I know we're running slightly late, so we are not going to rush you, so you will have your hour. So whenever you are ready. Wojtek, if you could stop sharing the screen.